Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Thomas Hellmann. I'm a professor of entrepreneurship here at the University of Oxford, and I'd like to welcome you all to our little information session. I'm going to kick off by talking a little bit about entrepreneurship, why we might want to study it, what it really means. Um, then I think my colleague Brad Piston is going to tell you a little bit about our specific offerings, online offerings that may or may not be of interest to you. And then we're going to leave lots of time for questions and answers. And so you're very welcome to use the chat functions. We may not get to you right away if you post a question, but we will certainly try to get to the majority of questions before the hour is over. So, welcome. If you joined us, it's probably because you're somehow interested in entrepreneurship, innovation, venture creation, venture financing. And guess what? So am I. I think this is an incredibly important area. And I want to begin first to talk about why entrepreneurship? Why would we spend our time on this? And I'm going to tell you two things you're going to like, and I'm going to tell you one thing that you're not going to like. So the first thing that probably many of you would agree with is entrepreneurship is exciting. I mean, if you think of your own career, yes, you could work in government or a large corporation for all of your life. And in our parents' generations, a lot of people have done that. But somehow millennials, modern people look for more diversity, look for more creativity, more innovation. And a lot of us are attracted to the entrepreneurial path or the entrepreneurial ecosystem because there's an excitement, there's a notion that we can make a change, we can make a difference, we can build something. And I share that excitement. Now, the second good news I want to give you, I think entrepreneurship is really important. By training, I'm an economist, and so I study what creates economic growth. And there's no question that entrepreneurship is at the core of sort of the modern economies, about competitiveness, about productivity. Some of you might actually care about employment. So there's some very important studies that have shown that basically all of the net job creation comes from a small set of entrepreneurial companies. Now, not every small company is an entrepreneurial company, and the key difference is the level of ambition, the intent of whether you want this small thing to grow and become something large. And among those who intend to grow and then have enough lucky breaks and make enough right moves, they become the high growth companies and they create all the jobs. So entrepreneurship is incredibly important for the economy. So what's there not to like? Well, I told you I'm going to tell you one thing that you're not going to like, and that's that entrepreneurship is tough. It's really tough. And there is a huge amount of failure. And I've worked with entrepreneurs for over a quarter century now, and I've seen many people try and fail, and I've seen a few succeed, and that's incredibly exciting. But we also have to deal with this notion that it's not easy, and lots of mistakes get made. And that makes us think, well, if we want to go down and join the entrepreneurial ecosystem, think about entrepreneurial careers, how can we be smart about it? How can we learn and not to make all the mistakes and set ourselves up for success? Nobody can guarantee success, but at least we can prepare for success. So here's an interesting question. The question is, can you teach entrepreneurship? And since I'm a professor of entrepreneurship, occasionally people sort of challenge me and says, oh, well, very nice. Well, can you teach entrepreneurship? And I think it's a great question. And my first answer is always to answer with a question, which is an old trick that professors do. And the question I answer with is, well, do you think that entrepreneurs learn? And then people look at me surprised and say, I never thought about it this way. Well, if entrepreneurship can be taught, it must be that entrepreneurs learn. So let's first answer that question. Do entrepreneurs learn? And the answer is a resounding yes. And I can give you lots of evidence. For example, the venture capital community, the people who invest in startups, put a huge premium on what's called a serial entrepreneur. Now, a serial entrepreneur, the word basically comes from serial killer, but it's a little bit more friendly. It's an entrepreneur, not a killer. But a serial entrepreneur is somebody who started 2, 3, 4 companies. So somebody who's done it before. And why is that such a huge deal for venture investors? Well, they know, and they've worked with lots of entrepreneurs and know that people learn an enormous amount by going through the process. There's a certain pattern recognition, there's a certain skill set, there's a certain mentality that comes from being exposed to the entrepreneurial process, and that makes serial entrepreneurs more experienced. Now, I can give you lots of other examples. For example, I know lots of entrepreneurs who keep coming to me and who keep coming to accelerator programs and various programs because they need guidance. They're looking for mentoring. They're looking to learn how to do this task because it's inherently a difficult task. So there is absolutely no questions entrepreneurs learn. Can it be taught? And there, I think we have to be subtle. There are some things that cannot be taught. So, for example, I strongly believe we can teach tools and frameworks and ways of thinking, and they're important in the entrepreneurial process. But then there are other things we can't teach. Passion. Without a doubt, every entrepreneur that's successful had a huge passion for it. And we can give you some inspiration, but we can't teach you passion. So it's very important not to overpromise and say, yes, entrepreneurs need to learn. And let's create an environment in which there are different ways of learning about entrepreneurship. So I would like to, at this point, ask a really important question, or point out the following. Often you get asked by family, by friends, by whoever, it's, oh, do you want to become an entrepreneur? And I'm quite sure that some of you are sitting in your seat right now and saying, maybe, but I haven't quite figured it out yet. That's good. That's natural. Some of you know it. Some of you are unsure. I love that uncertainty, and I love the discovery process of figuring out whether entrepreneurship is for you or not. And in fact, the question I ask is the wrong question. The question isn't, should I be an entrepreneur? The right question to ask is, what is my potential role in the entrepreneurial ecosystem? It's a subtly different question, but in the first question, we're assuming a fixed role that you have to be the founder. And there are some people who love that and who are cut out to do it and so on. But there's so many more roles in the entrepreneurial process. And once we demystify entrepreneurship, once we understand what it's all about, each and every one of you can say, okay, I think I know where I fit in. It's not whether I fit in, but where I fit in. And then you can make your career choices. You can start your ventures, join existing ventures, become an investor. One of the most important part of the entrepreneurial process is the funding of it. And so some people attack it on building companies, others on financing companies. And I think we can help you with both the building and the financing of it. Now, who am I to be here and preach? I haven't really properly introduced myself. It's lovely to meet you, even though I can't see you. And I'm sure we're going to go and talk a little bit in the Q&A. So I'm a professor of entrepreneurship here at Oxford. I spent the majority of my career in North America. I started in Silicon Valley. That's where I got the bug. I got fascinated by entrepreneurship. I've traveled the world and I studied different ecosystems emerging and developing, an entrepreneurial environment. At Oxford, I've been leading our teaching offering. Well, I'm doing research. I'm offering our teaching offering for the entrepreneurship area. And then I'm also very involved in building, in some sense, in an entrepreneurial way within the university programs. I was part of the team that built something called the Oxford Foundry, which is for Oxford students. And for the moment, I'm very involved with something called the Creative Destruction Lab. If you're interested, you can look it up online, but it's a venture acceleration program for science-based ventures. So I love the entrepreneurial area. I deeply believe that it is something meaningful for our students. And one of the limitations has always been that being in a university, we have a wonderful MBA program, but the number of people we can reach is inherently limited by sort of the size of the program. That's why I'm so proud of the team that I work with here at the university, of our online offering. Within a few years, we've reached thousands of students already, and we're ambitious and want to reach and get the message out to a large set of people who can't physically be in Oxford and who want to learn online. So I think the online environment is brilliant. And if you're interested in entrepreneurship, typically you're already doing something else. And so you have to sort of squeeze it into a busy schedule. And so I was really excited to start working on building an entrepreneurship portfolio within the online courses. That portfolio obviously fits into a broader portfolio of online courses. And I've got Brad with me, who I'm sure is very happy to answer any questions about the broader portfolio. I can speak to the entrepreneurship courses. And so I'd love to just give you an initial idea of the two courses that we've developed. I'm very proud of them. I can't tell you which one I like better. They're different, but I think they're both address different interests and maybe different career paths. One of the programs is called Venture Creation, and the second one's called Venture Financing. So let me give you an overview of what the idea for these online courses are. I think all of the courses are primarily for people who are considering or in the process of making career changes. They are also suitable for people who are a little bit further down the path and have begun a career in the entrepreneurial sector, be it on the venture creation side or on the venture financing side. But sort of let's start with people who are looking into this. They probably have some intellectual curiosity and then some career ambitions maybe, and they want to find out, what is this entrepreneurship about? And you can go and you can read the biography of Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, and that's great fun, but it doesn't touch you personally. It doesn't give you the role models and the frameworks for thinking about it. Our goal at Oxford is to demystify the entrepreneurial process, to put you in the best position to make good choices. And maybe the choice is, actually, now I understand it and it's not me. That's okay. Or the choice is, it's absolutely me, and now I feel more confident, more competent to get going. You will still have lots of surprises along the entrepreneurial journey, be it on the creation or the venture financing side. But the purpose of these online courses is to give you the confidence to go in that direction and become active. How do we do that? Well, I think there's several elements that I would emphasize as being important. One is clearly some sense the classical study, that you do some readings and you learn. We believe very much in learning from those who've come before you, and so you will find that we have a lot of video content of entrepreneurs, of investors who can talk about their experiences. And I firmly believe that listening to these people often helps, because in addition sort of to the written word, seeing somebody on screen who looks like I could do that too is really inspirational and encouraging. We also believe that it's really important to have community. And so in our online courses, you will be working with a community of like-minded people. And I think that's worth gold, because often it's the friends, the peers that are kind of struggling with the same things that you can learn from, that you get inspired from, and that you can get help from. So you'll be working in teams for a variety of exercises, and the idea is to get your hands dirty. Now here's the other thing. I told you entrepreneurship is difficult and it's full of failure. One of the reasons for doing these online courses is that you can sort of play before you go out into the big world. It's a little bit of a testing ground. and you can play around with a business idea, you can play around with making venture investments, and you get a sense and you learn. But it's play. There aren't the real stakes. You're not doing the real thing. The moment you do the real thing, your time schedule gets crazy, the stakes get crazy, the emotional demands get very high. So this is a great testing ground for you to experience what it might look like. Let me say a few specific words about each of the courses. The venture creation course is really for thinking through the process of starting a company. And basically, we're trying to cover sort of all the areas where people make lots of mistakes in order to sort of at least avoid the mistakes that everybody knows about. My message is always simple. You will make mistakes. Try to make new mistakes. Try to do some original mistakes, but learn from those who've come before. You learn about the frameworks, learn about the issues, the questions. And even though entrepreneurship seems like this wild, crazy thing, there's actually a method to the madness. There is a set of processes that we can learn. Exactly how they come out in your venture will always be different for every venture, but the processes are actually quite similar. And so we talk about how do we identify venture opportunities. We have a simple framework in which we emphasize that every venture needs to have a problem and a solution, as well as a team to develop. And based on these three really simple elements, we then sort of build more powerful frameworks about how do we really find out what the problem is? Because most of the time, the genius of the entrepreneur is seeing a problem that hasn't been well formulated yet. We then hear from great entrepreneurs who build businesses, how they apply their solutions, how they build the initial customer relationships, how they build the product and things like that. And so this framework basically covers the major steps of building a business, giving you the confidence to say, okay, now I understand what it would take me to build a business. In the venture financing course, we take a slightly different perspective. So in the venture financing course, we focus on what is often described as one of the biggest pain points for people starting a company, which is, where do I get my money from? And it turns out there isn't one answer. It's really about understanding the financing challenge. So in the venture financing program, we use something that I call the two hats approach. So it is the entrepreneur hat and there's the investor hat. And in the videos, you see me doing this all the time. Why? It's very important. We need to have a dual perspective on the financing. Financing is a transaction. It requires both parties to agree to the transaction. And the most important mistake that entrepreneurs make is not to understand the investor perspective. And the most important mistake that investors make is not to understand the entrepreneur's perspective. So what we do in the venture creation course is establish the way that these two parties approach financing, identify who they are, because there are many ways of getting financing, identify the questions that they ask, the questions that entrepreneurs ask, the questions that investors ask, and give you some frameworks. There's a little bit of fear of finance. I don't know how many of you are smiling or grimacing at this point, but let's be honest, a lot of us have fear of finance, fear of numbers, fear of spreadsheets. Well, one of the things that we want to make very clear in the venture financing course that there's nothing to be afraid of here. The mathematics or the formalities or the technicalities of venture financing. I see some people smiling in the chat. Thank you. That's lovely to hear that. There is nothing to be afraid of, and we're going to give you the tools. And once the experience is always, once you understand it, you're like, oh, is that all there is to it? Oh well, I can do that. So the venture financing course will give you some of the technical tools. You will be looking at spreadsheets. But the whole point is to make you comfortable. And in that context, let me mention that we have a tutoring system, so you get lots of support. If you have questions, we have a wonderful team of people who are there to help you throughout the learning journey. This is sort of a brief outline. I could talk for hours about this, but I don't want to take too much time to describe the two programs. I can already see that we've got some questions coming in the chat channel. That's great. We're going to get to these questions in a moment. But before we do, I'd like to briefly hand over to my colleague Brad. And Brad will share with you some of the practicalities that you probably should know about these courses. And then once we've gone through Brad's slide deck, we're going to take all the questions jointly. So Brad, if you're here, maybe you can open your camera and your slide deck and spend a little bit of time giving an overview of the programs.
No, thank you very much, Thomas. Really appreciate you giving up your valuable time, and thank you very much to today's audience for giving us an hour of your time to learn more about our entrepreneurial offerings at Side Business School, the University of Oxford. So thank you for joining us today. So we Side Business School, the University of Oxford, and as Thomas mentioned, we offer two executive education programs focused on venture finance and venture creation, with slightly different audiences and outcomes in mind. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Actually, before we jump straight into the detail, it's probably worth quickly reflecting on when we talk about our online executive education portfolio. What are we talking about, and who this is for? So we launched our online executive education portfolio and partnership in 2017 with Get Smarter, one of our two official EdTech partners at the school. Our portfolio has quickly grown to over 20,000 participants from 172 countries during that time. We typically attract participants from all over the world, but as you can imagine, from certain geographies. But what does the typical audience or participant look like that gets attracted onto our programs? Well, and it's probably helpful for the audience to understand how we situate ourselves slightly differently to massive open online courses. So our online portfolio is very much in line with our on-campus executive education programs. It just happens to be delivered online. It's not a cheap substitute product, and we invest heavily in all of our offerings. So whether you do an executive leadership program or one of Thomas's programs, the one thing you will notice is we convene a very senior audience across those 20,000 participants. The average age is 40. More than 90% have a bachelor's degree, over 54% have a master's degree, and about 10% of the audience have a PhD. So typically we convene a very senior audience, and the profiles do vary according to the different programs. But what you can expect is a very well-educated, experienced audience to learn from. And it's important to note that participants all undertake the journey at the same time through 6 or 8 weeks collectively. It's not like a MOOC where it's self-paced and participants finish the program in 3 days or undertake the learning journey separately. We move together as a collective 1 week at a time. So typically, as you can see up on the screen, it's an investment of time. We provide a very high-touch model, and this helps us to achieve a 93% successful completion rate. Participants do assignments, you are graded, you can pass and fail, but our high-touch model helps us ensure that we provide the necessary support as you would expect from Oxford in an in-person setting. Next slide, please. So it's very important to note, as these aren't MOOCs, we are focused on both individuals and organizations. We offer a range of different organizational benefits, and we have ways of structuring teams and groups together to ensure that whether you are an individual or whether you are an organization looking to send groups or cross-functional project teams from your organization, we will support you accordingly in your journey. Next slide, please. We offer programs, close to 20 programs across the main areas of leadership, finance, strategy and innovation, entrepreneurship, and digital transformation, you could say. So slightly more topical, disruptive topics. Next slide, please. Organizations have a number of different options, whether you want to buy a specific program for your organization or whether you wish to send a group of 20 or 50 or 100 participants. We can cater to your needs to help ensure you receive the best of both worlds. So some love open executive education because they are exposed to diverse participants from all over the world. But likewise, we can tailor a more focused journey with a dedicated tutor to ensure that you can have a balance or the best of both worlds from open or custom executive education. Next slide, please. These are some of the organizations that have sent large groups or sponsored teams from an organizational point of view. But we've noticed, especially during COVID, that more businesses are receptive to the idea of online executive education as an alternative option of development. Next slide, please. And this is thank you. My details are up there. So if you wish to follow up with regards to our organizational focused offerings, or specifically with regards to our venture creation or venture finance offerings, which Thomas will be going into in a bit more depth in this conversation, please get in contact with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. That was great. I've been following the chat and the Q&A, and there's some great questions. So I think I'm going to answer some of the questions. I'm going to pass some of the questions to Brad, but maybe I can start with Chirag. Chirag, you had a very interesting question with sort of a concern about, well, how does this work in the Indian context? I presume you're from India or working in India. And in fact, there's sort of a broader question I'd like to raise, which is, well, is this content really focused on a particular set of countries, or is it global? And we've made a very big effort to make this course globally relevant. We see ourselves at Oxford as having the sort of the privilege of seeing a lot of entrepreneurial activity around the globe. I would say the following. If your interest is understanding commercial entrepreneurship in an Indian context, or some of you might be interested in African or Latin American context, you're in the right place. If, on the other hand, your interest is really in social entrepreneurship, poverty alleviation, there's a lot of expertise at Oxford around that. And so I know enough about these topics to say that, this is not what we do in the venture creation one. So the venture creation and venture financing one are very much focused on the commercial model. Now, everything you said in your little note, Chirag, about India is about, commercial entrepreneurship in a developing country context. There's a lot of interesting issues around what kind of an ecosystem is needed for entrepreneurship to work. I think this course prepares you well. It wouldn't give you every detail you want to know about India or Kenya or Bolivia or whichever is your favorite country. It wouldn't do that. But what it would give you is sort of enough of a framework and a perspective that you can then see how to apply and develop that in your own country. And if you're interested, in my textbook, there's a whole chapter on that as well. So, there are ways of going further, down that channel. Very good. Now, Ian in the question and answer asks a question about sort of, can you demystify funding rounds? And what's a series A, B, C, D? Well, thank you, Ian. That's a great question. And I mean, this is exactly the sort of thing that we do. And in fact, let me demystify it already a little bit. You may not have realized this, but you missed the most important round, which is the ones that happen before the A round. So this is weird. The way that the venture industry works, it talks about a pre-seed, a seed round, and then you get to A. And this makes no sense unless you start learning about this. And what you learn is that A stands for the first institutional round. But before you go to institutional investors, you typically have some kind of angel investments, and even the angel investment market is sort of has its own structure. This is exactly the sort of things that we learn about. The exact definitions of A, B, C, D have never been written down anywhere, but by sort of, explaining what the process is of how to build a company, one can see how that matches into funding rounds and then see what it means to be a Series A or B or something like that. In fact, I'm going to use your question, Ian, to link it to another really interesting question that I got from John. John, I'm going to mispronounce your name, but John Fotheringham. And John tells us that he's already doing this. He's an angel investor and he's making EIS investments. And he's asking, is this the right cause? Well, I would say, John, it may or may not be. I'm notorious for not overselling, in the sense that if your interest is very specific and you're saying, well, I've made some angel investments and I now just want to find out how does a Series A work, and what does a venture capital firm look like, I would say if your interest is narrow, there are great sources to read up on those specifics. I have written the textbook and you can read a couple of chapters in there, or you can go on the web and find other things. On the other hand, if you're saying, I'm an angel investor, I've been doing this for some time, and I'd love to get a more holistic understanding because I think there is more that I can do. Maybe I can go deeper, maybe I can get better, and I want to understand what it takes to be an effective investor. I want to understand how to work better with the entrepreneurs. Then I would say, come and join us. I think you're going to learn a lot and you're really going to enjoy both the content and the community that we have in this course, because it will broaden your skill set, it will broaden your perspectives. And you are going to learn about the Series A and about angels, but you're also going to learn, say, about crowdfunding or strategic investors, or why entrepreneurs have a different way of looking at questions than investors. And so it'll broaden your horizon. And in that case, I would warmly encourage you to take a close look at the program. Now we have several other questions. We have Rohit. And Rohit sort of asks two questions. The first one is whether you need to have capital in order to become a venture investor. And the second one is, well, what do careers look like in venture financing? So, Rohit, if you have capital, it certainly helps because you can become an angel investor. An angel investor is just a term that we use, and some people it involves investing, say, £10,000, and for some it involves investing £10 million. So, I mean, the range of angel investors is very large. But I think the question is coming from a basis of saying, what if I don't have capital? Well, there's absolutely no requirement to have capital. The way to, you can't enter with your own money, but you can join professional organizations and, have a career in the venture financing industry. The obvious careers people think about are venture capital. I will say it's a tough industry to get into. And so most people, and that's something we're going to talk and learn about, we have people who give us expert advice in part of the online course, just to sort of give you an idea of what that looks like, is, you sort of think about what career path will lead me to have an attractive profile to join a venture capital firm. But it doesn't have to be a venture capital firm. There are, and that the perspective we take is this is an industry, an ecosystem. So, for example, I'm running an accelerator program, and we have some people who joined us, and I think they're setting themselves up. In fact, some of them have since then left and joined the venture capital industry, but they're working in the ecosystem in other positions that set themselves up for a career in venture financing. And what's the earnings potential? Well, I mean, at the top end, venture capitalists can be have incredibly high earnings, and that's particularly if you are a senior partner in a venture capital firm. You get something called carried interest, and that is a very high earnings potential. And we're going to teach you and learn. You're going to learn about that. And for the rest, I think it's a career in the finance industry, and the finance industry in general has the properties that the earnings potential is good, but obviously it's also a very competitive sector, which is why it's good to have the right skill sets and sort of frameworks to think about whether the finance industry or this particular part of the finance industry is attractive to you. I would say venture financing is very different from investment banking. So, I mean, that's something you're going to learn, is that there are some important nuances, and the work of a venture capitalist is very different from that of an investment banker. So I hope that gives some idea to that question. I want to move to Ed. Ed had an interesting question that I think we should take very serious. And Ed says, on the venture creation course, is it a big disadvantage if I don't have a business idea before beginning the course? Thank you, Ed, for asking that. I'm sure other people had the same thought. And in fact, this is a thought that kept me up at night when I was designing the course. I think it's very important that you hear very loud and clear, no, you are not at a disadvantage. We've designed the course explicitly for people like you who may have interest, ambition, passion, but haven't found the right idea. How does it work? During the venture creation program, you will be working on a business plan and building a venture presentation, a pitch deck, essentially. If you have a real idea, you can work on that. If you don't have a real idea, you might be able to join somebody else in the course who's working on it. And even though that person may be doing something that personally you would never do as a career, as a learning experience, it could be incredibly valuable working with somebody else who has a business plan. Even if you have a group, a team, and there is no business plan that's coming, what we teach you is how to pick an idea, explore it, and then see how far you can go. And the beauty of that is sometimes I think you're even at an advantage because you're allowed to play with an idea, you can explore it, but you don't have to do it at the end. So you can learn as much as possible, and then you can step back from saying, actually, I don't really want to do this venture. So the course is designed so that it's irrelevant whether you're actually going to start a venture or not. The learning experience is the same. And the reason I can say this with confidence is we've been doing this for decades at the business school in terms of our, in-person teaching, where we have a lot of students just like you who take our entrepreneurship courses without an idea that they necessarily want to do. So it's about learning about the process. That is the essence of what we do. In that sense, we're very different from a business accelerator. If you go and you want to apply to the Creative Destruction Lab, to the Y Combinator, to Techstars, to all these accelerators, you better have an idea and some traction on that idea. Otherwise, you wouldn't qualify. What we're doing in these online courses is very different. We're trying to give you the confidence that if and when the idea comes up, you know what to do. Very good. So let me take a quick stock here. I'm going to come back to a second series of questions, but I briefly like to go to Brad. Brad, Ian asked a question about certificates. And he asked, what are the requirements to receive the certificate? Maybe you can take this one, Brad.
Of course. Thank you, Thomas. Very good question, Ian. Each program is structured slightly differently in terms of how we balance out the assessments and the assignment requirements. In order to earn your certificate, you would need to complete all your weekly assessments and assignments. So participation both as an individual but also as a team member contributes towards that. And as long as you are keeping on top of that and passing your assignments, you will achieve your certificate of completion. So you will need to to reach the pass mark, and it is an investment of time. So I think I touched upon during my brief presentation. And like MOOCs, we are often looking at 7 to 10 hours a week on average in terms of how much time is needed to comprehensively cover the material, understand it thoroughly, to pass. And we have a 3-layered high-touch model. So we have a head tutor and an academic facilitation team. So they will work carefully with all participants to ensure that they understand the academia and the material at hand. We also have a success manager or coach, and our global 24/7 support team to ensure that your work-life balance, especially now during COVID, and any technical requirements are addressed during the program to ensure you can work when you need to work, whether that be on a Wednesday night at 11 or first thing on a Sunday morning. So hopefully I've answered your question comprehensively.
Wonderful, Brad. Thank you. And you've added some other useful detail. I'm sure that was very useful. We're being swamped with questions, which is the best thing that I was hoping for. And so let me try to tackle some of the ones posed in the question and answer. First, there is Talal, who asks is whether in the venture creation course we build on design thinking frameworks. And the answer is absolutely yes. But design thinking is only one part of it. And in some sense, we explain how it interfaces with all the other steps and all the other requirements of building a venture. But in my personal opinion, I'm a big fan of venture design thinking, and we put some twists on that because the beauty of observational power we think is central to the entrepreneurial process. So we basically teach people how they get to the truth, and the truth is more than what is being said. And design thinking and observational methods are central to understanding that. Thank you. Now, there's a question from Nuparat. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And sort of, it's a great question. It's like, what are the pros and cons of starting a venture with a family member or with a friend? And these are sort of the real questions that, we have to grapple with. What we do in the venture creation course, and I think it's quite unique, is in addition to sort of talking about some of these issues, we give students an exercise. And it's one of the toughest exercises you will face when you're starting a real business. The exercise is, how do you divvy up founder equity? So when you're starting a business, you have several founders. Do you just give everybody the same? Does everybody get 1/4 if there are 4 of us, or 1/3 if there are 3 of us? Or do we have a different arrangement among founders? And I've actually done some research on that. And so what we teach is based on research that I did together with Professor Noam Wasserman from the Harvard Business School, who's written a whole book about some of these issues. So if you're interested, go and read Noam Wasserman's book as well. He's a friend and colleague, and I think highly of his work. But the exercise we do is to actually go through the process of negotiating, of trying to figure out how, if I work with a friend or if I work with others, how do I make it happen? And what's the arrangement, the financial arrangement that we do? And it's quite a visceral exercise. And so what we do is, before you go out in the world and have that real negotiation, you can come to the course and you experience what the issues are in a safe space. So another way of looking at this online course is, this is a safe space in which you can learn before you go out into what is a interesting but challenging entrepreneurial reality. Very good. Mark is asking about, well, if investors only want serial entrepreneurs, how do I get going the first time? This is a good question, and the good news is, yes, there's a preference, but not an absolute preference for serial entrepreneurs. The majority of entrepreneurs are doing it for the first time. But one of the things I want you to start thinking about is, maybe I can have a different combination. If I want to start a business, maybe I partner with somebody else who's already started another business, or maybe I join a business as an early employee. One of my early students is Jeffrey Skoll. Jeffrey Skoll was employee number 1 at eBay. And he's now a philanthropist and a great person. But he built his entrepreneurial career not starting a company. He figured out that being an employee number one of an exciting company called eBay is also valid. So there are many ways of approaching this, and this is the kind of tools and frameworks that we want to give you to make these personal choices. Now, John said, I've hired many people from the Ivy League, the Oxbridge, the IIT, and they're great, but they don't always know how to do lateral thinking. They don't always know how to deal with ambiguity. I hear you, and we think this is particularly an issue in the traditional way of teaching business and in the sciences and engineering. And that's why entrepreneurship is becoming a much bigger part of the university. And yes, I mean, that's what we deal with. Working in ambiguity, uncertain environments, that's entrepreneurship. So this is definitely the kind of skill sets and mindsets that we develop here. Now, there's a very interesting question I want to tackle very upfront. Meng Zhu or Zhu, I'm probably mispronouncing it, apologies, asks whether this will be helpful if I want to open a coffee shop or restaurant. And I'll give you a very honest answer. And the answer is it depends. If your thing is to say, I want to open up a coffee shop that is pretty much the same coffee shop as the other 10 coffee shops in my town, I just want to do it on a different street corner, this is not the right course. Because what you're doing then is you're planning a small business. And so this course, we're not focusing on building a small business. On the other hand, you could be saying is, I want to open a coffee shop because I think I've got a new concept and I have a vision for doing something that hasn't really been done before. And even though I'm going to start with opening one coffee shop, I envision this becoming something bigger, something ambitious, something growth-oriented. Please come and join us, because then you're a growth-oriented, ambitious startup, and that is the focus of what we're doing. Another way of saying that is, this online course is not about the minutiae of running a business. You know, we're not going to teach you how to do your bookkeeping. We're not going to teach you what it is that you pay your first employee. That's things that with the tools that we give you, you're going to figure out. The harder part, we think, is building a vision for something new, ambitious. And if that's what you're interested in, you're in the right place. On the other hand, otherwise, if you're really interested in just small business skills, there are many other places you can learn these skills, but not, this would not be the right course for you. And I think the next question about Andrea is like specific things like, tax requirements. How do we handle the human side of entrepreneurship? Performance anxieties. I would distinguish two levels here. The specific taxes, no, you're not going to learn that in this course. And the reason is we have a global audience and there are hundreds of tax systems, and it would be a waste of time because, you would only be interested in one tax system and there are other tax systems out there. So that specific detail, that's not the right place. Now, on the other hand, you're saying, how do I want to handle the human side of entrepreneurship? I think we do a lot of that. I think we talk about the emotional resilience of a founder, what it takes to be a leader of an organization. We have a whole module on leadership. And so if it's at that sort of more higher level, more strategic level, yes, then, HR and the human side of entrepreneurship is absolutely central and important. Very good. I'm sort of scrolling through. There's so many questions that I know I won't be able to get through all of them. Apologies in advance. There's a number of questions that Brad, maybe if you want to pick out a couple of them, are more sort of about what it is that the school can offer. So if you want to pick up on a couple of questions, like where do we sign up and so on, I think that would be great.
Of course. Thank you, Thomas. I've noticed a couple of questions asking that. So as we mentioned, these are partnership programs. So yes, absolutely 100% they are based on Side Business School, the University of Oxford, our IP, our research in partnership with Get Smarter, our chosen and official education technology partner. So just want to ensure that everybody was aware of that. There's two ways to sign up or access. You can either do it directly through our website. So if you go on to executive education, you find online programs. If you go to either the Oxford Entrepreneurship venture creation program, or the same, except venture finance, you will find the specific dates. From there, you can apply. During this time, you will be redirected to our Get Smarter website. So essentially, we have pages across the entire partnership, and you can either go via our website or you can go directly to the University of Oxford specific university partner page on the Get Smarter website, and you can start your application there. With regards to venture creation, the programs, we have a program starting on the 27th of January, and we will continue accepting participants until the 1st of February, which is during our orientation week. And the exact same set of dates, start dates, are true for venture finance as well.
Wonderful. Do you want me to continue? Maybe I'll just say a few things, and then Brad, maybe you're going to close off. I sort of want to maybe get to three more people very briefly. So Yishin is asked, says, I've done the venture financing course. I want to join, the investment side. Would it be good for me to take the venture creation course? My sense is probably, in the following sense. I'm a firm believer that the best investors are those who have empathy with the entrepreneur. Now, we teach some of that in the venture financing course with the two hats, and we keep reminding people that if you want to make this transaction work, you have to understand what the other side is doing. What the venture creation course can offer you, and that may be attractive here, is a deeper and sometimes more visceral understanding of what it is that the entrepreneur is going through. And frankly, some of the best investors are those who started companies. So if you think of Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen is now a superstar venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, but he's the one who started Netscape at a very successful company. Maybe one of the biggest names in European venture capital is Nick Zenström, founder of Atomico. He started Skype before starting Atomico. So understanding that is I think very important. Specifically, the two courses, venture creation and venture financing, were designed so that you can take them and they have separate content. So there is essentially minimal overlap, so that the learning experience, there's a whole new learning experience in the venture creation course. There was a similar question, let me find it, by an anonymous attendee saying, I'm taking the diploma in strategy and innovation. Would it also make sense for me to add an entrepreneurship component? I would say yes. The strategy and innovation is, it's a great course. Congratulations for getting into the diploma program. But the entrepreneurship is sufficiently different that I don't think you would be wasting your time. The only thing you have to think about is whether you can do both in parallel or whether you want to sequence them one way or another. Now, there was one more question that I briefly want to touch upon. Ifra is asking about Africa. And Ifra, the question you're asking about Africa is a deep question. A question I'm actually very interested in is, how do we make this venture financing environment work in Africa? Very simple answer. You would not be getting an answer to the question, how do we make venture financing possible in Africa, in this course? That's not what the course is about. However, if you're interested in answering that question, the course would give you some tools and frameworks for thinking about that and exploring this question with greater confidence. Let me give the remaining 3 minutes to Brad, who can maybe wrap up. I know we didn't answer all the questions, but I must say you've asked really great questions, and I hope we covered a lot of the important ground.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Really, really appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for everyone's time. I will try and pick a couple of more questions before we end off. A couple a couple of our attendees today have asked about comparing various programs, and you know what? We love to give a universal set of considered advice. When you are looking at different executive education programs and you are trying to situate, you know, what does an Oxford Get Smarter program look like versus an MIT edX program in terms of, you know, fees, commitment, etc. The one thing I would say is please take some time to look under the hood of the offerings. Some MOOCs will often have one or two professors, maybe a handful of guest speakers. The content will be heavily geared towards lecture captures and videos. When we say we invest heavily in our programs, we often work, you know, across our portfolio. We're usually working with 5, 10, on some programs, 15 to 20 different faculty members. So often we're looking at interdisciplinary offerings, and much like Thomas has done with venture finance, he's trying to bridge the worlds of entrepreneurship and finance, which, you know, are typically left and right brain and require a different type of thinking, which are often in contrast to one another. But when evaluating our programs, you know, please ensure that the institution you are spending your hard-earned money with has invested the time, effort, and money into the type of programs you wish to take. So look at the number of guest speakers, but more importantly, you know, speak to the team, understand, you know, is it predominantly videos? You know, we got asked a question earlier, is it just video content? No, we do have interviews with experts across the field, but these are dynamic videos. Often you're asked questions within the videos and you need to answer that to progress to the next section. We facilitate that with forums and discussions and interacting with a high-touch tutoring team. Often a lot of our tutors are Oxford alums or SBS alums. So we use our own alumni ambassadors who care and respect for our brands, and they take that level of care into their tutoring to often bridge the gap between research, teaching, and delivery, all very important components. So please do take a careful look. And if you do want to discuss this with the team, please, you can get hold of me at bradford.peaston@sbs.ox.ac.uk or our online exec ed mailbox, which is online execed@sbs.ox.ac.uk, and either myself, Ryan, or a member of the team will be happy to schedule a call to discuss these various differences with you, to distinguish and help you make informed decisions with regards to your educational investments, or, you know, any questions, please. We're happy to help you. So thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Please send us some feedback. We will intend to do future webinars, maybe in a slightly different format, but we think that the freestyle format today gave us a great opportunity to engage with you and answer more of your questions, as opposed to structuring it around one specific piece of content, which webinars often are. So thank you so much for your time.
And I'll say thank you as well. It's been a real pleasure. All the best.